The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Westfield Farmers Market in suburban Atlanta, Georgia, as Martha Washington carefully counted the crumpled bills in her worn leather purse. At 58, she had the weathered hands of someone who had worked hard all her life, and the tired eyes of someone who had lost more than most people could imagine. $14.37, she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible above the bustling sounds of vendors setting up their stalls. It would have to be enough to buy groceries for the week, though she knew it meant another few days of eating mostly rice and beans. Martha had been widowed 3 years ago, when her husband James died suddenly of a heart attack at the construction site where he'd worked for 22 years. The life insurance policy they'd thought would protect her had been canceled months before his death due to a clerical error at his company, leaving Martha with nothing but funeral expenses and a mountain of medical bills from James's final hospital stay. She walked slowly through the market, her worn sneakers squeaking against the concrete, carefully comparing prices at each stall. Her shopping list was short, but essential: rice, dried beans, a few vegetables, and maybe some marked down bread if she was lucky. "Excuse me, Mum, are you planning to buy something, or are you just here to handle all my produce?" snapped Bradley Morrison, a middle-aged vendor with a perfectly groomed beard and expensive-looking clothes. He had been watching Martha examine his tomatoes for several minutes, turning each one over to find the best value. "I'm sorry, I was just looking for ones that aren't too bruised," Martha replied softly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I need them to last through the week." Bradley rolled his eyes dramatically. "Look, lady, this isn't a charity. Either buy something or move along. You're driving away my real customers." Martha quickly selected 3 tomatoes and handed over $2, even though she noticed one had a soft spot that would probably spread quickly. As she walked away, she heard Bradley mutter to another customer, "These people come here expecting handouts. It's a farmer's market, not a food bank." The comment stung, but Martha had grown accustomed to such treatment over the past 3 years. Since James's death, she had learned that being poor made you invisible to some people and a target for others. She had applied for dozens of jobs, but at 58, most employers seemed to prefer younger candidates. The few positions she'd been offered paid barely enough to cover her rent, let alone food and utilities. Her next stop was the produce section, where she hoped to find some affordable vegetables. As she bent down to examine a bag of marked-down carrots, she heard a familiar voice behind her. Well, if it isn't Martha Washington, still shopping for scraps, I see." Martha turned to see Victoria Sterling, a woman she had once considered a friend. Victoria was impeccably dressed in a designer outfit that probably cost more than Martha's monthly rent, her blonde hair styled perfectly despite the humid Georgia morning. "Hello, Victoria," Martha said quietly, straightening up with the bag of carrots in her hand. Victoria and Martha had known each other for over 15 years. Back when Martha and James lived in a nice suburban neighborhood and Martha worked as a nurse at the local hospital, they had served together on the PTA, organized charity drives, and their children had played together. But when Martha's world fell apart, Victoria had been among the first to distance herself. "I have to say, Martha, you really should consider shopping at the discount stores instead of embarrassing yourself here," Victoria said, her voice dripping with false concern. "I mean, everyone can see you counting your food stamps." "I'm not using food stamps, Victoria. I'm paying cash," Martha replied, though she knew Victoria was just trying to humiliate her. Victoria laughed, a sound that was anything but pleasant. "Oh, that's right. You're too proud to accept help, aren't you? James always said you were stubborn." The mention of her deceased husband hit Martha like a physical blow. "Please don't," she whispered. "Don't what?" "Mention the truth, Martha. You need to face reality. You're poor now. You live in that terrible apartment complex on the wrong side of town. You dress like a homeless person. Maybe it's time to accept that this is your life now." Martha felt tears threatening, but she refused to give Victoria the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "I need to go," she said, turning to walk away. "Oh, Martha," Victoria called after her, her voice now loud enough for other shoppers to hear. "Before you go, I should mention that the charity auction committee had to remove your name from the volunteer list. We simply can't have someone of your current circumstances representing our organization. You understand, don't you? Martha stopped walking but didn't turn around. The charity auction had been something she had organized for 7 years, running, raising thousands of dollars for local families in need. Now she was apparently too poor to help other poor people. I understand, Martha said quietly, continuing toward the exit. As she walked through the parking lot, Martha's hands shook as she fumbled for her car keys. The 1999 Honda Civic had seen better days, with rust spots along the bumper and a passenger door that only opened from the inside. But it was reliable transportation. She sat in the driver's seat for several minutes, allowing herself a moment of grief for the life she had lost 3 years ago. She had been a respected nurse, a homeowner, someone who contributed to her community. Now she was someone people, like Victoria, looked down upon. Someone who had to choose between buying vegetables or paying for her medication. But Martha Washington was made of stronger stuff than Victoria Sterling realized. She had survived losing her husband, losing her house, and losing her career. She had maintained her dignity through homelessness, hunger, and humiliation. What Victoria didn't know was that Martha had spent 30 years as a trauma nurse, saving lives and helping people through their darkest moments. As she drove home to her small apartment, Martha made a decision. She would continue to shop at the farmer's market because she deserved fresh food as much as anyone else. She would hold her head high because she had nothing to be ashamed of. And she would continue to be the kind, compassionate person James had fallen in love with, regardless of how others treated her. What Martha didn't know was that the very next week, her path would cross with Victoria's again in a way that would change both their lives forever. Sometimes, the people we look down upon are the very ones who end up saving us. And sometimes, our greatest trials prepare us for our most important moments. The first chapter ended with Martha sitting in her modest apartment, sharing a simple dinner of rice and beans with her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who was even poorer than Martha but had become her closest friend. As they ate together, Martha felt grateful for the simple blessing of companionship, unaware that her true test of character was just days away. The following Saturday morning brought an unseasonably warm day to Atlanta, with temperatures climbing into the mid-80s before 10 a.m. Martha Washington arrived at the farmer's market early, hoping to find better deals before the crowds arrived. She had managed to save an extra $5 by skipping her blood pressure medication for a few days, bringing her total budget to $19 and change. The market was bustling with activity as vendors arranged their displays and early shoppers searched for the best selections. Martha moved methodically through the stalls, her worn canvas bag slung over her shoulder, carefully comparing prices and quality. At the far end of the market, she could see Victoria Sterling making her grand entrance. Victoria was dressed in a flowing white sundress that probably cost more than Martha's monthly food budget, her hair styled in perfect waves. She pushed an expensive designer stroller containing her 6-month-old daughter, Sophia, while talking loudly on her phone about some charity event she was organizing. No, Victoria was saying into her phone, her voice carrying across the market. We simply cannot have the silent auction in the same room as the dinner. These people are paying $500 a plate, and they expect elegance, not some tacky school fundraiser setup. Martha tried to stay on the opposite side of the market, but Victoria's voice seemed to follow her everywhere. She could hear Victoria complaining to various vendors about prices, demanding special treatment, and generally making a spectacle of herself. Excuse me. Victoria snapped at an elderly Hispanic woman selling handmade tamales. Do you have any idea how much sodium is in those things? I'm organizing a health and wellness charity event, and I simply cannot be seen eating processed food. The elderly woman looked confused and hurt. They are made fresh this morning, Segura, very healthy, with vegetables and lean meat. I'm sure they are, Victoria replied dismissively, already walking away. But I need to maintain certain standards. Martha watched the interaction with growing disgust. She remembered when Victoria had been different, kinder, more compassionate. Money and social status had clearly changed her, turning her into someone who believed her wealth made her superior to others. As Martha continued her shopping, she noticed that Victoria was having trouble managing both her phone calls and her baby. Little Sophia was fussy in the heat, crying intermittently while Victoria tried to conduct business calls. The expensive stroller was difficult to maneuver through the crowded market, and Victoria seemed frustrated by the whole experience. "I don't know why I thought bringing the baby to this place was a good idea," Victoria said loudly to her friend Michelle, who had joined her at the market. "The smell of all this food is making me nauseous, and Sophia won't stop crying." Michelle, equally well-dressed but slightly more down-to-earth, tried to be helpful. "Maybe she's too warm. It's really hot out here." "She's fine," Victoria snapped. "She's just being difficult, just like her father's side of the family." Martha finished her shopping and was heading toward the exit when she heard Victoria's voice rise above the crowd noise. "This is ridiculous. I specifically asked for organic strawberries, and these clearly aren't organic. Do you think I'm stupid?" The young farmer, probably in his early 20s, looked embarrassed. "Ma'am, I explained that we have both organic and conventional strawberries. The organic ones are $3 more per basket." "Well, why didn't you say that in the first place?" Victoria demanded. "Do you know who I am? My husband owns half the commercial real estate in this county. I could have you shut down." The young man's face flushed red. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I was just trying to show you the options." Martha felt her anger rising. She had known Victoria for 15 years, and this cruel behavior was something new. The woman standing there berating a young farmer was not the same person who had once volunteered at the Children's Hospital or organized food drives for hurricane victims. As Victoria continued her tirade, Martha noticed something that made her blood run cold. Victoria had parked her expensive stroller at the edge of the farmer's booth, and in her anger, she had forgotten to set the brake. The stroller was on a slight incline, and baby Sophia was starting to slide slowly toward the busy parking lot. "Victoria," Martha called out, but Victoria was too busy yelling at the farmer to hear her. The stroller picked up speed as it rolled toward the parking lot, where cars were backing out and pulling in. Martha dropped her shopping bag and ran as fast as her 58-year-old legs could carry her, her heart pounding with adrenaline. Just as a large SUV was backing out of a parking space, Martha lunged forward and grabbed the stroller, pulling it to safety just inches from the vehicle's path. The driver, who hadn't seen the stroller, continued backing up, completely unaware of how close they had come to a tragedy. Martha's hands shook as she held the stroller steady, looking down at baby Sophia, who had stopped crying and was now looking up at her with wide, curious eyes. The baby was beautiful, with Victoria's blonde hair and bright blue eyes, completely innocent and vulnerable. "Oh my God, Sophia!" Victoria screamed, finally realizing what had happened. She ran toward Martha, her face pale with terror. "What happened? What were you doing with my baby?" "She was rolling toward the parking lot," Martha said breathlessly, still holding the stroller. "You forgot to set the brake." Victoria snatched the stroller away from Martha, her hands shaking as she checked her baby for injuries. "Don't touch her. Don't you dare touch my baby." "Victoria, I was trying to help," Martha said, confused by the hostile reaction. She was about to roll into traffic. "Help, you were probably trying to kidnap her." Victoria's voice was hysterical now, drawing attention from other market shoppers. "Everyone knows you're desperate for money. How do I know you weren't planning to hold her for ransom?" Martha felt as if she'd been slapped. "Victoria, I just saved your daughter's life." "Saved her? You probably loosened the brake yourself." This is exactly the kind of thing a desperate person would do, create a crisis, so they can play the hero. A crowd had gathered, and Martha could see the judgment in some people's eyes. Here was a wealthy, well-dressed woman accusing a poor woman of attempted kidnapping. To some observers, Victoria's story might seem plausible. "Ma'am, I saw the whole thing," the young farmer said, stepping forward. "This lady saved your baby." The stroller was rolling toward the parking lot, and she ran to stop it. "She's probably paying you to say that," Victoria snapped, her paranoia now in full control. "I saw it too," said Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who had been shopping nearby. "Your stroller was rolling away while you were yelling at that young man." This woman risked her own safety to save your child. More witnesses began to speak up, all confirming Martha's version of events. But Victoria seemed incapable of accepting that the woman she had publicly humiliated just 1 week earlier had saved her daughter's life. "I don't believe any of you," Victoria said, her voice shaking. "I'm calling the police. This woman is dangerous, and she shouldn't be allowed around children." Martha felt the familiar sting of tears, but this time they were tears of anger rather than sadness. "Victoria, I have spent 30 years as a trauma nurse. I have saved more lives than you can imagine. I would never, ever hurt a child." "Liar," Victoria screamed. "You're just a bitter old woman who lost everything and now wants to drag everyone else down with you." The crowd was beginning to turn against Victoria now, recognizing her accusations as both false and cruel. But Martha had heard enough. She picked up her scattered groceries and walked toward her car, her head held high despite the chaos behind her. As she drove away, Martha could see Victoria in her rearview mirror, still holding baby Sophia and arguing with the growing crowd of witnesses. Martha had done the right thing, but she wondered if Victoria would ever be able to acknowledge that the woman she despised had just saved the most precious thing in her life. What Martha didn't know was that several people in the crowd were recording Victoria's meltdown on their phones, and that the young farmer was already posting his account of the incident on social media. Sometimes the truth has a way of spreading faster than lies, and sometimes the people we think we can treat badly are the very ones who end up saving us in our darkest moments. By Monday morning, Victoria Sterling's meltdown at the farmer's market had become the talk of Atlanta's social media circles. The video of her screaming accusations at Martha Washington, while dozens of witnesses defended Martha, had been viewed over 50,000 times and shared across multiple platforms. Entitled "Rich Woman Accuses Hero of Kidnapping After She Saves Baby." Read the headline on the local news blog that had picked up the story. The article included interviews with multiple witnesses, all confirming that Martha had heroically saved baby Sophia from rolling into traffic. While Victoria was distracted by her own tantrum, Victoria sat in her mansion's pristine kitchen, scrolling through the comments on her phone with growing horror. The woman who had built her social reputation on charity work and community involvement was now being called heartless, delusional, and a disgrace to motherhood. "This is a nightmare," she whispered to her husband, Richard Sterling, who was getting ready for work. "They're all defending her. They're making me look like the villain." Richard, a successful real estate developer, had always been pragmatic about his wife's social climbing. "Victoria, maybe you should consider the possibility that you were wrong. From what I'm reading here, this woman saved Sophia's life." "She did not save Sophia's life," Victoria snapped. "She was probably trying to steal her." "Victoria, listen to yourself. You're talking about a woman who spent 30 years as a trauma nurse. Multiple people saw what happened. The stroller was rolling toward traffic, and she stopped it. End of story." Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from her friend Michelle. "Vicky, you need to see the news. Channel 7 is running the story about the farmer's market incident. They're calling Martha Washington a good Samaritan, and, well, you're not coming off very well." Victoria turned on the television just in time to see a reporter standing outside the farmer's market, recounting the events of Saturday morning. The story included interviews with several witnesses, including the young farmer who had recorded part of the incident. Mrs. Washington acted without hesitation, the farmer said on camera. She saw a baby in danger and ran to help, even after Mrs. Sterling had been rude to her and other vendors all morning. "She's a hero, and she didn't deserve to be treated that way." The reporter then cut to an interview with Mrs. Patterson, the elderly witness. "I've been shopping at this market for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like it. That poor woman saved a baby's life, and the mother accused her of trying to kidnap the child. It was shameful." Victoria's doorbell rang, and she peered through the window to see a reporter and cameraman from Channel 7. standing on her front porch. She ignored them, but they rang again. "Mrs. Sterling, we'd like to give you an opportunity to respond to the allegations that you falsely accused Martha Washington of attempted kidnapping." The reporter called through the door. Victoria's hands shook as she realized the full scope of what was happening. Her reputation, everything she had built over the past 15 years, was crumbling because of one moment of paranoid rage. Meanwhile, across town in her modest apartment, Martha Washington was dealing with her own media attention. Several news outlets had tracked her down, wanting to interview the hero nurse who had saved a baby despite being treated poorly by the child's mother. "I don't want to be on television," Martha told the persistent reporter who had knocked on her door. "I just did what anyone would do. I saw a baby in danger, and I helped." "Mrs. Washington, can you tell us about your relationship with Mrs. Sterling? We understand you to know each other." Martha sighed. "We used to be friends a long time ago, before my husband died, and I lost everything. I think grief and loss can change people in different ways. For me, it made me more compassionate. For Victoria, it seems to have made her more afraid." "Are you angry about her accusations?" "I'm sad about them," Martha said honestly. "I'm sad that she's become someone who would rather believe the worst about people than accept help when it's offered. But I'm not angry. I understand that she was scared for her baby." The reporter seemed surprised by Martha's grace. "Would you like to respond to Mrs. Sterling's claims that you were trying to kidnap her child?" "I think the witnesses speak for themselves," Martha replied. "I've spent my whole life helping people. I would never hurt a child." Back at the Sterling mansion, Victoria was fielding angry phone calls from friends and colleagues. The charity board she chaired was reconsidering her position after the negative publicity. The country club was reviewing the incident to determine if any action was needed. Even her own mother had called to express disappointment. "Victoria, I raised you better than this," her mother said on the phone. "That woman saved Sophia's life, and you attacked her. You need to make this right. Make it right. Mother, you don't understand. This woman has been stalking me at the market, trying to get money from me. She probably planned the whole thing." "Victoria Sterling, stop talking like a crazy person. You're embarrassing yourself and your family." That evening, Victoria's husband Richard came home to find his wife in their bedroom, crying while scrolling through social media comments. "They all hate me," she sobbed. "Everyone thinks I'm a monster." Richard sat on the bed beside her. "Victoria, you need to accept what really happened. Martha Washington saved our daughter's life. You were upset and scared, and you lashed out at her. It's understandable, but it's also wrong. I can't admit I was wrong. Do you know what that would do to my reputation?" "Your reputation is already destroyed," Richard said gently. "The only way to fix it is to tell the truth and apologize." Victoria looked at her husband through tear-filled eyes. "I can't face her. I can't face anyone. You can and you will, because that's what decent people do when they make mistakes." The next morning, Victoria found herself driving to the modest apartment complex where Martha lived. She had gotten the address from the phone book, and now she sat in her luxury car outside the building, trying to find the courage to go inside. Martha's apartment was on the second floor, and Victoria climbed the stairs slowly, her heart pounding. She had rehearsed what she would say, but now all her prepared words seemed inadequate. When Martha opened the door, she looked surprised but not angry. "Victoria, I wasn't expecting you. May I come in? I need to talk to you." Martha stepped aside, allowing Victoria into her small but clean apartment. The furniture was old but well-maintained, and the walls were decorated with family photos and inspirational quotes. "Would you like some tea?" Martha offered, ever the gracious hostess despite everything that had happened. "No, thank you," Victoria said, then changed her mind. "Actually, yes, please." As Martha prepared tea in her tiny kitchen, Victoria looked around the apartment. This was where her former friend lived now, in a space smaller than Victoria's walk-in closet. The reality of Martha's situation hit her for the first time. "Martha, I came here to apologize," Victoria said when Martha handed her a cup of tea. "I was wrong about what happened at the market. You saved Sophia's life, and I accused you of trying to hurt her. I was cruel and paranoid, and I'm sorry." Martha sat across from her. Thank you for saying that. I know it wasn't easy. To come here, I've been watching the news coverage, and I realized something. I don't know who I've become. The woman who accused you of kidnapping isn't the person I used to be. I used to care about people. I used to help people. What happened? To me, Martha studied her former friend's face. I think you became afraid. When you have everything, you start to fear losing it. When you have nothing, you learn that you can survive anything. I treated you terribly, not just at the market, but for years. After James died, I abandoned you when you needed friends the most. I was embarrassed by your poverty, as if it might be contagious. I forgive you, Martha said simply. Victoria looked shocked. Just like that? After everything I've done? Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about choosing not to let bitterness poison your own heart. I learned that lesson the hard way. Victoria began to cry, not the manipulative tears she had used to get her way throughout her privileged life, but genuine tears of remorse and gratitude. I don't deserve your forgiveness. None of us deserve forgiveness, Martha replied. That's what makes it so powerful. As Victoria prepared to leave, she turned back to Martha. Is there anything I can do to make this right? I know an apology isn't enough. Martha smiled for the first time since Victoria had arrived. Actually, there's something you can do, but it's not for me, it's for you. 2 weeks after Victoria's visit to Martha's apartment, the Sterling family made an announcement that shocked Atlanta's social elite. Victoria Sterling was stepping down from all her charity board positions to focus on meaningful community service and had donated $50 to establish the James Washington Memorial Fund for displaced families. But the most surprising development was Victoria's new job. She had begun volunteering at the Atlanta Community Kitchen, where she worked alongside Martha Washington, serving meals to homeless families 3 days a week. I never thought I'd see Victoria Sterling ladling soup, whispered one of the regular volunteers as they watched Victoria carefully portion out meals for a line of hungry people. Victoria had traded her designer outfits for simple jeans and t-shirts, pulled her hair back in a practical ponytail, and rolled up her sleeves to do the unglamorous work of feeding people who had nothing. The transformation was remarkable, but it hadn't been easy. I don't know how to do this, Victoria had confessed to Martha during her first week of volunteer work. I don't know how to talk to these people. You talk to them the same way you'd want to be talked to, Martha replied, gently, with respect and kindness. Remember, these are people who are fighting battles you can't see. Victoria had struggled initially. She was used to being deferred to, used to being the one who gave orders rather than the one who took them. But Martha was a patient teacher, showing Victoria how to interact with dignity with people from all walks of life. Mrs. Sterling, right? Asked a middle-aged man named Robert who came to the kitchen regularly. I heard about what happened at the farmer's market. That was pretty messed up. Victoria's face flushed with embarrassment. Yes, it was. I made a terrible mistake. Well, you're here now, Robert said, shrugging. That's what matters. We all make mistakes. Victoria had been surprised by the grace she received from people who had every reason to judge her. Many of the people she served had seen the news coverage of her breakdown, but they seemed more interested in her willingness to serve than in her past mistakes. One evening, as Victoria was cleaning tables after the dinner service, she found herself working alongside a woman named Carol, who had been homeless for 6 months after losing her job and apartment. You know, Carol said as they wiped down the tables, I used to be a teacher, had my own house, nice car, retirement savings. Then I got sick, lost my job, lost my insurance, and lost everything. Funny how fast life can change. Victoria looked at Carol with new eyes. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Most people don't, Carol replied. They see homeless people as if we're a different species. But we're just people who ran out of options. Could happen to anyone. The conversation stayed with Victoria. As she drove home to her mansion that night, she was beginning to understand what Martha had tried to tell her, that poverty wasn't a character flaw, and that anyone could find themselves in desperate circumstances. At home, Victoria's relationship with her husband and daughter was also changing. Richard had been skeptical of his wife's sudden transformation. but he was beginning to see genuine changes. In her behavior, "You seem different," he said one evening, as they watched their daughter Sophia play in her nursery. "More present. I feel different." Victoria admitted, "I feel like I'm finally doing something that matters. The charity boards you were on mattered. You raised a lot of money for good causes." "I raised money so I could feel important," Victoria said honestly. "I never actually helped anyone directly. I just wrote checks and posed for photos. What I'm doing now is different." Victoria's social circle had largely abandoned her after the farmers' market incident, but she found that she didn't miss the shallow friendships and competitive socializing. Instead, she was forming genuine connections with people like Martha, Carol, and the other volunteers at the community kitchen. "I think you should consider going back to nursing," Victoria said to Martha one evening as they cleaned up after serving dinner to over 100 people. "I'm too old to start over," Martha replied. "Besides, I don't have the money for recertification courses." "What if money wasn't an issue?" Martha looked at her suspiciously. "Victoria, I don't want charity." "It's not charity, it's investment. The community needs experienced nurses, and you're one of the best. Let me help you get back on your feet professionally." After weeks of gentle persuasion, Martha agreed to let Victoria pay for her recertification courses. Within 6 months, Martha was working part-time at a local clinic, using her nursing skills to help low-income patients who couldn't afford expensive health care. The transformation in both women's lives was remarkable. Victoria had discovered that true fulfillment came not from accumulating wealth and status, but from serving others and making a real difference in people's lives. Martha had learned that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones struggling with their own pain and fear. 1 year after the incident at the farmers' market, Victoria and Martha were featured together in a local magazine article about unlikely friendships and community service. The photo showed them working side by side at the community kitchen, both smiling genuinely as they served meals to a diverse group of people. "Mrs. Washington saved my daughter's life," Victoria was quoted as saying, "but more than that, she saved my soul. She showed me what it means to respond to cruelty with kindness, to hatred with love. I will never be able to repay her for that gift." Martha's quote was equally powerful. "Victoria taught me that people can change, that redemption is possible for everyone." She could have stayed in her comfortable bubble after what happened, but she chose to do the hard work of becoming a better person. That takes real courage. The article also mentioned that Victoria had quietly paid off Martha's medical debts and helped her secure a permanent position at the clinic, while Martha had become godmother to little Sophia, forming a bond with the child she had once saved. On the first anniversary of the farmers' market incident, Victoria and Martha returned to the same market where it had all begun. This time, they shopped together, Victoria helping Martha pick out ingredients for a meal they would prepare together. At the community kitchen, "You know," Victoria said as they walked through the market, "I think about that day a lot. I think about who I was then and who I am now. I'm not proud of the woman I used to be." "You don't have to be proud of who you were," Martha replied. "You just have to be committed to who you're becoming." They stopped at the stall where the young farmer still sold his produce. He recognized them immediately and smiled warmly. "Mrs. Washington, Mrs. Sterling, it's so good to see you both. I've been following your work at the community kitchen. You're doing amazing things." Victoria bought a large order of vegetables for the kitchen, and as they prepared to leave, the young farmer called out to them, "Mrs. Sterling, I just want to say thank you for proving that people can change. You've inspired a lot of us to look at our own lives and think about how we can do better." As they walked to their cars, Victoria reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, she had been a bitter, frightened woman who had attacked the person trying to help her. Now she was someone who had found purpose in service and had formed the most meaningful friendship of her life, Martha. She said as they reached their cars, "I have something to ask you." "What's that?" "Would you and Mrs. Chen like to come to Sophia's first birthday party next month? I'd like her to grow up knowing the woman who saved her life." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "I'd be honored." As they drove away from the farmer's market, both women carried with them the knowledge that sometimes our worst moments can lead to our greatest transformations. Victoria had learned that true wealth comes not from what we accumulate, but from what we give away. Martha had discovered that forgiveness has the power to heal not just others, but ourselves. The story of their friendship became a testament to the possibility of redemption, the power of second chances, and the truth that sometimes the people we think are our enemies are actually the ones meant to save us, just as we might be meant to save them. In the end, both women had been rescued, Victoria from her own bitterness and fear, and Martha from the isolation and despair that had threatened to consume her. They had found in each other not just friendship, but a reminder that our common humanity is stronger than our differences, and that love, even when it comes through the most unlikely circumstances, always has the power to transform lives.